I realized there is no judgment on us. None, no matter what we do or how we do it or who we become, there's no judgment on us. There is hospital and education on the other side to help people remember who they are, to help them heal from the human experience. Depending on what's happened with you psychologically or physically, mentally and emotionally, spiritually, if you're not in alignment with your soul and your high self, you need to find a way to get to that positioning. And that's why they have the hospital and the education on the other side, to bring people back up to speed to who they were in their soul essence.
Today, we're privileged to welcome Dianne Sherman, a spiritual life coach, intuitive counselor, and vibrational healer. Dianne's journey began in 1981 with a profound near-death experience that revealed the boundless love and joy of the universe. Since then, she has dedicated her life to helping others heal and transform through her practice, guiding your spirit, and inspiring individuals to embrace the magic of life. Dianne, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here with you. I love this.
We're excited to have you. Thank you again so much for making time for us today. Now, Dianne, before we start, if you don't mind, could you tell us a little bit about your life before your NDE?
Before my NDE, well, the reason I had an NDE was because I had surgery, and it had taken me 10 years to get to the place where I was having the surgery. I'd had an accident swimming in Mexico with my husband, and thank God he was there and that he was a powerful swimmer, because he pulled me out of the water. I had dislocated my knee and torn cartilage and done all kinds of things, and I was frozen in pain, and I almost drowned. So that was the beginning of it. And at that time, I was in my 20s and I was still modeling. And so 10 years later, in 1981, when I was in my early 30s, it was time to kind of give up that. And I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I had a 6-year-old daughter, and at that point, when I was going to have the surgery, I was divorced. And my life was in sort of an upheaval. And my parents had died. My mother died the year before. And I just didn't know where I was going and what I was doing. So I was at a real crossroads.
Now, before your NDE, did you have any religious belief, any religious background?
Oh, very Catholic, 12 years of Catholic school. I went to boarding school, which was, if you wanted it to be, convent school also.
If you don't mind, Dianne, can you walk us through your NDE?
Of course. As I had mentioned, I finally went in for the arthroscopic surgery. I had waited 10 years because if I had done it originally, they would have had to have done the major patella surgery where they open up the kneecap. And it's a big scar. And I was still working as a model, so I couldn't have scars like that. And with arthroscopy, it was just there was 4 little tiny holes that really didn't show at all, especially with a little bit of makeup on them. So that morning, I was sitting on the gurney waiting to go into pre-op, and I was freezing. I was just shaking and racking with cold. And one of the nurses came by and she said, "Would you like a warmed blanket?" And I thought, that sounds fabulous. I would love that. So yes, please. And she brought it, and my body started to really calm down. And I stopped the shaking. It was like racking. And I think my body intuitively knew what was coming. So by the time I got into the operating room, I was already out, which is interesting because you don't normally go out before you go under, but I was out like a light sleeping.
So at this time, they still hadn't given you any anesthesia or anything like that?
I hadn't had anesthesia. I'd had a pre-op shot.
Okay.
And that and the warm blanket, my body just went. So the surgery went a lot longer than they had anticipated because there was a lot more damage than they realized. In 1981, when I had it, they didn't have MRIs. And so they didn't really know exactly what they were getting into. And at that time, working, I was like 116, 117 pounds, and I was 5'9". So I was a lightweight at that point for me. And so I was under anesthesia much longer than I had anticipated and they had anticipated. So the first thing I realized is that I was in recovery. And in recovery, as I'm starting to become aware, I hear activity next to me. And they're working on this woman, and they're calling her by name and they're saying, Diane, wake up, Diane, wake up. And I thought, what are the odds of it being her name is the same as my name? What are the odds of that? So I went back to my own experience in that moment in time. And then a few minutes later, I heard them say, Dianne Sherman, wake up. Dianne Sherman, wake up. And I thought, oh my God, they've got the wrong patient. I wonder if they did the wrong surgery. What's happening? So I'm waving at them and they're not responding. And I thought to myself, well, maybe it's because they're preoccupied working. There were 3 people working on this woman. And I thought, they'll pay attention to me when they can. And then I'll ask my questions. The next thing I knew, I was standing at the bottom of her bed, looking up at her, and I saw it was me. And the strange thing was, I could look down at myself and see myself physically. And then I looked up at her, and I knew it was me, but there was no connection. I didn't feel anything about her or for her. It's almost, and I say this every time because it's the only thing I know that feels like it. It's like somebody said, pass the salt, you know. It was totally neutral. And
Okay.
I didn't even think about that at the time. So as I'm watching them working on her, trying to bring her back, I'm now up in the corner of the room, looking down on what's happening. And as I'm watching, I'm notating it, but I'm not involved in it. It's not drawing me in. It's not a problem for me. I'm not curious. And from there, I could feel myself being pulled out of the ceiling corner and now hurling forward in this blackness. There's blackness everywhere around me. And as a child, I was terrified of the dark. And I thought to myself, if I can just find a little glimmer of light, just a little something to hang on to, I'll be okay. And so I'm struggling to find something, to see something, and I'm fixated on finding something because I know I'll be okay. And I know I won't be okay if I don't find it. So I see this one little tiny glimmer of light and I'm holding on to it and I'm hyper focused on it. And as I'm focused on it, it's starting to grow and to become everything around me. And it's it's so hard to describe this, but it's a color, it's white, but it's diaphanous, like clouds. Um, and it has this iridescent cast to it, which almost looks like the rainbow effect. You know, it has all the colors of the rainbow in it, but yet it's white, but a white like I've never seen. And all of a sudden, I realize as I'm amongst this white, loving, cloud like experience, I'm starting to float forward. And as I'm floating forward, it's starting to part in front of me. And I kind of giggled to myself that I was floating. I was aware of that. And I thought, I'm floating, because I could see myself above what was ground level. I wasn't high up, I was just high enough to float, like a foot. And there are these 2 rows of monks on either side of me as I'm floating. And I stopped just before the end of the lineup of these monks, and they're in brown monk's robes with the hoods up. And they had no faces. It was blackness inside the hood, just blackness. That didn't seem odd at the time. It just seemed normal. And this one in front on the left stepped forward and he spoke to me. And I always say he because it felt masculine. It felt like someone who was in charge, who had the power, who was fatherly in a way, who was protective. And he spoke to me and he said, "It's not your time. You cannot stay. You must go back." And in that moment in time, I had been realizing how cherished I was feeling. I had never felt cherished in my whole life. And this was the sensation I had been looking for all of my life, which was that sense of belonging, that sense of being loved, that sense of being safe, that sense of coming home to myself. And I didn't want to give it up no matter what. And he kept saying, "It's not your time. You must go back. You have a child." And I started thinking about my daughter, who I love dearly. And I thought, who would take care of her? Who would love her on the level that I wanted her to be cared for and loved? Because my parents were gone. My sister, who was a few years older than I was not mentally and emotionally equipped to be a caregiver and a guardian. My ex-husband was my ex-husband for a reason. And I just didn't have close enough friends to really trust them with my daughter. And as I'm thinking about her and wanting her to be safe and loved and have the right life, I'm back in my body. And I don't know what brought me back. I don't know if it was my love for her or they sent me back. I don't know. I won't know till I'm back on the other side.
All
And
right.
so my first realization was being in my room in the hospital. And I had a roommate who had an arthroscopic procedure also. And she was in terrible pain. And I was up walking that night and I went home the next morning and I wasn't on any medication. The doctor said he'd never seen anybody heal as fast as I did. And he had a lot of reconstructive work to do.
You mentioned that you met the monk, the faithless monk.
Yes.
The main one, I guess the one that was in charge, when he started speaking to you and saying you have to go back, had you realized at that time that you were dead, or how was that thought process for you?
No, I never even dawned on me that I
Hmm.
was dead. No.
Okay. So how was returning back to your physical body? How was the experience like?
Well, there's a point where when you smack into your body, it's pretty tight. I didn't remember that in the beginning. It
Hmm.
was a few years before, things all started coming back about what had happened. The first thing that I realized that something was different, something had changed in me, is my sister and I went to a restaurant one night. This was probably a week after my surgery because I was on crutches. And I walked into this restaurant, and I've been in this restaurant many times, so I was familiar with it. It was comfortable. I could hear everybody's story. I could feel everybody's pain because I had become an empath. I'd come online to that. And I had psychic abilities at that point that I didn't have before. And I was overwhelmed by the noise. I was overwhelmed by the feelings. It was like, I don't know what to do with all this information. What am I supposed to do about all this? Because they were all needing help. in some form or other. And I thought, why am I hearing it? What am I supposed to do about this?
So how did you process that? Because that can be very different, very different.
I thought I was becoming psychotic, and I really didn't have anybody. If I went to the priest, he would have and said to him, I'm hearing all these voices, he would have thought I was losing my mind, or that, I was being in the Catholic Church, a
Possessed.
heretic, or whatever you want
Hmm.
to say. And, and if I told my doctor, he would have thought I would be certifiable. But that's what I thought was happening to me. But yet other parts of me felt so grounded and present. Everything that I looked at was more vibrant. The colors, everything was clearer. So that all felt good. So I was trying to balance, well, am I crazy, or has something happened to me? And, what's going on? I was becoming clairaudient.
Hmm.
Um, I was knowing about them. So clairsentient, clairaudient, clairvoyant, it was knowing what you had no way of knowing that you knew. I had that.
Hmm.
One of the things you have as an experience on the other side is you are tapping into the universal knowledge. So you know how things work, what everything is. You have answers for any questions inside of you. When you come back, you lose that. I've been able to tap back into that at times, doing different modalities, but it just, I had always been so anxious, and I was not as anxious as I was before my NDE. It
Okay.
was almost like I had this sense of God in a different way, and I wasn't understanding how. I will say about my religion is that I walked away from the Catholic Church. It felt like a lie for me, because what I experienced on the other side was so unconditionally loving. And the Catholic Church teaches a lot of fear and judgment. And I realized there is no judgment on us. None. No matter what we do or how we do it or who we become, there's no judgment on us. And there is hospital and education on the other side to help people remember who they are, to help them heal from the human experience.
You just touched on a concept that I've heard other people talk about, and it's like the healing, kind of like a healing center. As soon as someone crosses over, they go there for some time to kind of like recover,
Yes,
and then they go back to rest, and they stay there for a while. And
yes.
if we decide to come back, which you and I definitely have, is that what you're referring to, those healing centers? And can you expand a little bit on that?
My knowledge of it is very simple. I know that depending on what's happened with you psychologically or
Hmm.
physically, mentally and emotionally, spiritually, if you're not in alignment with your soul and your high self, you need to find a way to get to that positioning. And that's why they have the hospital and the education on the other side, to bring people back up to speed to who they were in their soul essence, because they're still carrying, depending on what they experienced,
Mm-hmm.
experiences from being human.
So they're still carrying a little bit of that humanness with them on the other side.
Well, they're still hearing the ego story. The ego's not, those ego stories are never real. They're a control mechanism.
Many people talk about having a live review during their NDE. Did
Mm.
you experience anything like
I
that?
did not. I did not. I did not have a life review.
Hmm.
It's interesting how the experience is analogous for each person.
Hmm.
For me, seeing the monks, because of my Catholic upbringing and living in California and having spent my childhood going to the missions and all that stuff, felt very safe and analogous for me. Um, Other people see Jesus and whatnot. I got a whole different experience, which is fine. And mine was pretty darn gentle compared to so many people. So I have no complaints. Um, what I know about the life review is that there is no judgment on us going through that. We get to judge ourselves. We get to see and feel what everybody else felt and saw when they interacted with us. And to me, that is far more telling than
Mhm.
having God or a whole plethora of saints or whoever you would think would be judging you. Reliving what they experienced and feeling it firsthand is very potent, I would imagine.
Yeah.
You're understanding what your words and actions did to them or for them. And you get to decide for yourself, is this who I truly want to be? Is this how I wanted to show up? Could I have done better? Could I have done it differently? If I had another opportunity to go back, what would I do differently? Would I do anything differently? Am I proud of myself? Am I ashamed of myself?
Speaking of understanding and learning from those experiences of potential life reviews, how did your NDE change your understanding of love, life, death, and the universe?
Oh, it changed everything. When I realized that there was no judgment, that I was just loved, because being loved was a big deal for me. I really didn't feel so much of that growing up, and I didn't feel it in my relationships either. Um, and I had always felt that life was happening to me. I was the victim. And what I realized in my experience is that life was happening through me because of my interaction with life, how I responded to life. I was creating scenarios for myself I didn't need to create. So it changed the game for me totally. I realized that we are an extension of the God force. We're just, in Catholic speak, made in the image and likeness. We are a direct connection, a direct conduit. So when you have that kind of ability, it changes how you view yourself. I realized I didn't have to keep knee jerking through my life, which is what I was doing. Before I had my NDE, I had been to church maybe a week before my NDE, and I was up at the altar, and it was like a scene out of a movie. I was just begging and pleading for God to give me some direction, show me what the heck I'm here to do, how to do it. I didn't have a clue. I was scared to death. And we have to be careful what we ask for, or be very clear in how we ask it and what the parameters are of it. I got what I call the cosmic 2x4, that
Oh,
smack.
yes.
And, it could have been so much worse, but it made me stop and reassess my whole world, and how I was living it and how I was viewing people. And I realized that every thought I have informs my actions, and everything I say and do affects everybody else. It's like a pebble in water, it just ripples out. Do I want to be putting good stuff out there, or, not? And I became much more accountable to my life, to my thoughts, to the people around me. And I realized that there's magic in the world. I always believed in fairy tales and magic and pretend when I was a kid. But I realize as an adult, and the older I get, I know this to be true. The kids have got it right. We have to go back to believing in the magic, because that's how we create. We have to see the magic happening in order to create and believe it and line up with it. It's not just about asking for what you want, it's about knowing it's already there. It's about being in gratitude for it being on the way, that it's there.
That
It's
is
stepping into
beautiful.
feeling it and experiencing it on every level. and you start small, like with parking, trusting that you'll find a parking place no matter what. It's probably been 20 years since I've worried about a parking place. I know that it's going to be fine. I'm going to have a parking place, but I also know I'm going to have the best place for me. It'll be the closest to the door, the easy accessibility for me. It'll just be simple and comfortable and wonderful, gentle experience, right? So I
Yeah.
know that before I ever get in the car. And so it just lines up. It's there.
Going back to the story, it reminded me of this Sunday. We were at church, and then the Reverend, she was giving the messages to each person that needed to hear it. And she came to my children and she told them not to ever lose the magic.
Oh,
Believe in the
good.
magic and grow up with that magic, because it's going to help them a lot when, when they grow up. It's going to make their life easier and, more manageable and a lot of other things. And that is something, Diane, that us as an adult, as we grow up and, start adulting, so to speak, it's easy to forget. We have, bills to pay. We got to find a job, and a job that pays good so we can afford our living, and many other things. Life happens to all of us, and it's
Mm,
easy to forget that magic.
of course.
What advice would you give the audience about how to going back to that place and finding their magic?
Well, first of all, you have to step out of your mind. You have to get back into your intuition and your high heart. They're your GPS. They will never lie to you and they will always guide you. The monkey mind will always be negative in some way or other, make you feel less than. So that's number one, get out of your head. Um, it's having the eyes of wonder like a child. You know, I have been to many places. I became a spiritual junkie at a certain point where I went to sacred sites around the world. And I was in Stonehenge at a time when you weren't allowed to go into Stonehenge, but we had gotten permission. There were 15 of us. And we were in Stonehenge touching the rocks, being with the rocks, being with the stones. And everybody was having mystical experiences. And we were there at beginning of sunset, and the orbs came out. The Devic forces were there, the fairies were there. It was incredible. So you can't be in your logical mind and see this stuff. You have to become childlike. You have to want to play again, because magic is play. And I am learning, the older that I get, that there's nothing more important than the magic. I look for it in everything, in every interaction I have. Now, I go to the market. I'm always open to seeing the magic, and I will have some little interaction with somebody that's just so sweet and so lovely. And, I'll be someplace and I'll be needing something, and somebody will walk up to me and say, "Are you looking for so and so? It's right over here." I it's constant. If people could see how lovely things work in my life. Now, doesn't mean I don't have the other stuff, because I do, but I'm constantly being led, being fed, being given, guidance. It's just, I'm so grateful for it. So you have to get out of your mind. You have to just look with softer eyes. You have to
Mhm.
allow your heart to quicken and guide you to things that might seem silly or corny or funny, or, you know, there's gifts there. Don't judge it. Play in it. See what's there for you.
Yeah, something as simple as going out for a walk and being present in that walk, feeling the sun, the breeze in your face, listening to the birds chirp around you while you walk
Absolutely.
your
That's
dog.
all the magic.
Even if your
Yes.
dog is dragging you and you want to control it, but find the
Especially if your
joy.
dog is dragging you.
Yeah,
Yes.
I have a
Yes.
20 pound little dog, and yeah, he drags me.
That's not a
But
little dog. 20 pounds.
but finding the joy in the smallest of things, it's
Exactly.
and it can be hard sometimes, because sometimes somebody cuts in front of us in traffic, and we want to it's, what is that teaching you? Find the positive on that. Is it teaching you patience? Is it teaching you to be kinder to that person and yourself at the same time? Is it teaching you to let go of that impulse of reacting?
I had an experience where a young man cut me off, and I drove up next to him at the light, and I put my window down and I said, "You really scared the hell out of me." And he looked at me and he said, "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to scare you. I'm so sorry I did that." I didn't yell at him. I wasn't angry at him. I just wanted him to know that he had a reaction in my body from what he had done. And he owned it. And I know it shifted him because he immediately was compassionate and gentle and kind. So, when I get on the road, I just give everybody as much space as they need to have. I'm not in a hurry. I know I'm going to get to exactly where I need to be when I need to be there because I know how to stretch time now. I know that that's an illusion. So I'm not pushing it to get there. And I know everybody out there is doing the very best they know how to do. So I'm honoring that and I'm honoring them. And I'm also honoring me and taking care of me. So it's usually a very gentle experience because I'm not putting any energy out there to create nonsense. I don't want that for me and I don't want that for anybody else.
Beautiful.
There's no judgment on who we show up as. So we just have to trust ourselves to be who we're supposed to be when we're there. Yeah.
Now, Diane, I want to go back to your near-death experience for a moment here. I know that the memories didn't, like you didn't come back with the memories right away. How
No.
long did it take you to talk about it once those memories came back, and how did your family and friends react to that?
Well, family would have been my sister. I didn't tell my daughter. I just told my sister. And I'm not sure how she really felt. Um, it was a big stretch for her. As a kid, I was a pious kid, so I think I must have had a near death when I was a little kid because through the years, I've had visions of drowning. And so my reaction to things was always different. It was always softer and gentler to a point. Um, I was led to people who were spiritual. I didn't know spiritual people at that point in time. I was led to spiritual people who were working in the energy. And I remember the first book I read was Agartha, Journey to the Stars. And it was the strangest book. It was very thick. And I have dyslexia and I thought I'll never get through this, but I did. But I could only read a couple of pages at night and then it would make me so sleepy I would just like go out like a light. But it was opening my consciousness to what it was all about. And I was led to this one woman who taught me how to meditate. And we would go on these wonderful spiritual journeys into crystals because she had a lot of crystals and I was learning about crystals and how much they support us in life. And, it was like new toys to play with. And we would journey inside the crystals and have conversations. And I know it sounds ridiculous, but we did this and we did it together. And we would find out the properties of the crystal and what it was there to teach us and all that stuff. And so my mind was becoming open more and more, with each person that I met that had more experience. You were talking about the Kundalini opening. I had that. There was this mutual friend who was doing documentaries, and they were working with this woman who had an extra organ in her body that the doctors could not figure out what it was. And so this woman did hands on, and I was so excited to meet her because she'd been to strange places too. And I got in line and I was the last one up. And when she touched my third eye in front, I went over backwards onto the floor and somebody caught me because the Kundalini energy opened and it just shot up through the crown chakra and forced me back. And all I could think of was how much I loved God that no matter what anybody ever said to me, I would always know how much I love God. I would die for God. And that wasn't my thinking at that moment in time, but that's what the Kundalini, one of the things it did to me, is I had this vastness of awareness that I hadn't had before.
Wow. Yes, my Kundalini awakening was completely unexpected. It was the first time that I ever tried meditating. I remember I went to YouTube, pulled up a meditation, a random meditation. I just felt compelled to click on a particular one, and I just listened to it. And I had never heard of a Kundalini awakening. I had never heard of a chakra. I didn't know what it was. And it was confusing because all of a sudden I
True.
saw myself traveling through space and time, and then I knew that I had my eyes closed, my physical eyes closed. But then I was like, wait a minute. So if I have my eyes closed and I know that I have them closed, why can I see and look around and see everything? It was very confusing. So you can only imagine how that how that went for me. It was, yes, and it opened a lot of abilities that I later kind of like shut down because I didn't know how to handle it, and I didn't have any support. I didn't know where to turn. And of course, my family being Catholic, I didn't talk to them about it because I didn't want them to think that I was possessed. At that time, when you went through your experience and when I went through my experience, the information about near death, spiritual awakening, and these sort of things were not as available as it is now.
What year
So
did you have yours?
2012.
Okay. So in 1981, there was no internet.
Mm-hmm.
So there was no way that the information was all over the world. There was only one book, Raymond Moody's book. I think it'd been out a year and a half or 2 years. That was
Mm-hmm.
it. I didn't even know the terminology near death experience.
For people that are maybe going through that right now and they feel alone, they feel like they don't have any support, they don't know where to turn to, you know, find their circle, find support, pretty much. What advice would you give them?
But there's a wonderful organization called IANDS, IANDS, International Association of Near Death Studies. They have chapters all over the world. And oftentimes you can go to meetings. If you can't do it in person, you can do it online. And that helps to be able to communicate with others who've had the experience and others who have come back and are grounded and comfortable in their skin again and knowing what it means for them. So that would be a place I would start. And they have a whole bunch of near death studies that you can read on their internet site. Um, I have spoken to a lot of groups through the IANS people for years, and that was the first time I spoke was an IANS group. Um, and I think it was very beneficial to go to the meeting the first time I went to one because it was like listening to somebody else's story. It gave me comfort in my own experience. I'm not crazy. This really happened to me. This was really profound for me. It still is profound for me all these years later. And to know that there's a reason. We came back to help people know not to be afraid. There's nothing to be afraid of. You are so loved and so cared for and so taken care of on the other side. I've watched people die and I see the struggles that many people have because they're so terrified. And the truth is, that's all man-made information about death, hell, damnation, all of that. None of that exists. We're all from the one, and we're going back to the source of the one. And it's just loving and supportive, and you'll be with your family, and there's nothing to be afraid of. And for me, I was also afraid of living. Not, I had gone through the dying part, and I thought, I got that. I could do that again. It was fine. But the living part was scary for me. But because of the near death experience and what I've learned spiritually, I realized there's nothing to be afraid of on either end. It's all a place of celebration. And we should be celebrating when people transition because it's a graduation. It's literally graduation from earth school. We're going to a higher part of ourselves. And I have said before, I'm hoping this is my last incarnation because I want to do work on the other side. I think that would be really fun. I've done so much more than I ever thought I could or would. I'm so grateful for the life that I've had. It's been a big one. And I don't have any regrets or I don't have a bucket list. I'm really content in who I am and where I am. If I can continue doing my work and being well,
Mm-hmm.
I'll stay, but I'd love to go home. I'd really
So I,
love to go home.
so I take it that you're not afraid of death at all.
Oh, not on any level. There's nothing to be
Beautiful.
afraid of. It's our fear that makes it hard and harsh.
Mm-hmm.
When you know who you are, when you love yourself, when you're a loving spirit, you just slip out of your body. It's a no-brainer. It's when we're terrified of what we're going to experience on the other end, that fear is what's making it so hard for us to let go. So, yeah, I mean, my message is always please don't be afraid. It's so loving, it's so beautiful.
Beautiful. Now, going back to your work, you mentioned that as long as you can continue doing your job, you
Yeah.
you're okay staying here. So, can you tell us a little bit about your practice, guiding your spirit? What guided you to create it, and what type of different options and services do you have for our audience that want to reach out?
Well, one of the things I came back with is the ability to see people in their preciousness. I don't see the facade. I see past that into the preciousness. And that's what I want people to see is their own preciousness so that they can learn to really love themselves. Because when you love yourself, the whole game changes. You're so much more on every level. And so people come to me who have blocks and barriers to not their success, although that's part of it, but their joy, their happiness, a life worth living. And I'm able to help them see and reform, translate, change the perception of what is so for them. Oftentimes they don't know what the connection is to their traumas in childhood. They don't
Mm-hmm.
realize they're still carrying them. And I can help them connect with their inner child to have conversations about all that stuff, to have the information so that they can create a relationship with that little kid and help that kid integrate into the adult version of them so that that child's not living alone, knee jerking and causing harm to themselves and to the adult. And I love being able to connect people to their hearts. There's so many broken hearts out there, and there's so many hurt little kids out there. And so many people are knee jerking through life, which is what I did. I was a hurt child. And the work that I do helps them heal that. You know, I do codes and frequencies in vibrational healing. And I am a conscious channel, so I know where they are with themselves. I get their story and I can show them where they're stuck and why they're stuck and help them connect the dots to, well, that's why. Now I understand more about me. Now I know why I feel that way about that. And once you do that, it's easier to change that. It's easier to say, boy, I'm an amazing creature. Let me see how I can learn to love myself more and have fun with myself and let me have fun with the people in my world that I care about. It's helping people evolve to a much higher level vibrationally. And my work has been shifting a little bit to encompass people who have some kind of company that they don't want, spiritual company. And I had a young girl who was in a foreign country, and I was working through her dad, and she had a possessive influence. She was 14. She was having a real tough time. And I was able to clear her of that, and she became a regular 14-year-old kid again, which I didn't know I could do it. I just knew I had to try, because I've had these experiences where I've had um, energies that come to me. There are spirits roaming that, first of all, don't know they're dead, don't want to cross over, and they're incarnate spirits. And so they glom onto a human body vehicle so that they can move around and do things. And I used to get that from time to time. And I had this lovely man who would help clear me. He was in another state, but we communicated by phone, and he was great at it. And I called him before Christmas, 2 years ago, because I had company again. I could feel it in my body. My body was feeling sick, and his number had been disconnected. And I thought, well, that's really strange, because we know each other well. He would have let me know if he was moving or doing something. And so I just got the hit to get on the internet and do some sleuthing. And I found out that he had died in an automobile accident in the snow on my birthday the month before. And when I went into meditation, I had a friend with me who does wonderful spiritual work. I realized that he was the energy that I was needing to get rid of. He had come to me to help him because he was stuck. He didn't have his seatbelt on
Oh
when he
no.
died. And this was a man who'd been working for many, many years, helping thousands of people. And he knew better than that. And he was so angry at himself for getting killed, putting himself in that position because he went through the windshield. And he didn't know what to do with the grief. So that's why he came to me. And we worked through it, and he was able to transition to the light. You never know where life's going to take you.
That's true. I mean, I have so many questions only on that last part there about the spirits that we can easily go into a tangent here and spend 3 more hours talking. But
Anytime.
thank you. Then we have to do it again and talk about more in depth about those things. But Diane, do you have any other projects that you're currently working on that you would like to share with our audience?
There's a part of me that knows I need to finish writing a book. So that's the only thing that's hanging out there, other than, just working with my clients. I've got clients all over the world, which just
Mhm.
absolutely makes me so grateful. They see my YouTube videos, which I didn't create. People interviewed me like you're doing, and that's how they find me, which I am so grateful for.
Beautiful, beautiful. If our audience wants to reach out to you and maybe schedule a session or hear more about you, where can they go?
I have a website, guidingyourspirit.com.
Hmm.
And I also have an email, Dianne, Dianne, at guidingyourspirit.com. And it has more information on there. And I'm here to answer questions or show up for people. My website does not show my cost. I do that intentionally so that people will contact me so we can communicate, because I need to determine if this is somebody I can help and somebody that I feel comfortable working with. And they need also to see if I'm what they're needing and wanting.
Hmm.
So I'm not exorbitant. Somebody said to me recently, I thought you were at least $300. And I said, no, not even close.
Well, that's good because it also, I believe that in order for two people to work together and for the work to actually work, both of your energies have to align.
Exactly. That's why I do the communication with them
Mhm.
first. Yeah.
That's
So that I
beautiful.
know, and I check in with spirit to see if this is
Hmm.
somebody that I should work with or should help or
Hmm.
whatever. And my session is 90 minutes, because it
Okay.
takes me that long to help somebody get to where I think they want to go. Because oftentimes I see people once and then they're off doing their thing.
What message would you like to leave our audience with today?
The most important thing I can say at this stage is learn to love and appreciate and celebrate who you are. because you're a divine being. You are absolutely precious. And every day that you don't realize that is a loss. Because when you own yourself in that way, it allows you to show up, and you just showing up with people informs them as to who they are, which is a gift. Your vibration uplifts others. So if you want to be the best version of yourself and have the best experience in life, really learn to appreciate and love yourself and stop listening to your monkey mind. It is not your friend.
Diane, that's a beautiful message. Thank you again so much for that message, and thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an honor to be with you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.